Congratulations, you have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lambcast. This is episode 747, and I'm your host, Richard Kirkham from Kirkham, a Movie a Day. We've had a week off and an off week. You see, there was a dearth of submissions for the Movie of the Month for September. So instead of conducting a poll, your shepherd made an executive choice and picked a film that's been submitted several times this year and which has been nudged out of selection by the narrowest of votes 3 times. Loyalty to the process and commitment to the film results in this week's Movie of the Month episode, and our film is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Speaking of loyalty, writer and podcaster Matthew Simpson of the Awesome Friday podcast joins us again for at least the 7th Movie of the Month episode this year.
Holy cats.
Has it really been 7 this year so far?
At least.
It's a pleasure every time.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. We're happy to have you.
Allow me to now read the Constitution of the Large Association of Movie Blogs.
If you could find it, could you refer it to me so I can dig it out?
E publista.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, as always.
Hoping to build up his bona fides for the October Movie of the Month horror movie selection, musician, blogger, and longtime Lamb Damien Riley also joins the show.
Oh yeah, plinka, plinka, plinka. Let's play some guitar. Oh wait, we're in the wrong room. Sorry, this is podcasting. Got it.
Movies, not music. This
That's
week anyway,
right.
At least. And finally, the champion of today's film, one that even he can't say he saw in its initial release in the theater. James Wilson from Blogging by Cinemalite.
But barely.
Look, the editors at Wikipedia put it this way. The year 1939 is widely considered the greatest year in film history. The 10 films nominated for Best Picture at the 12th Academy Awards include Dark Victory, Gone with the Wind, Goodbye, Mr. Chips, Love Affair, Ninotchka, Of Mice and Men, Stagecoach, The Wizard of Oz, Wuthering Heights, and our film today, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Across a huge range of genres, all of these films are considered classics. Maybe someday our Decade Look Back series will tackle 1939, but for the moment we're going to contain ourselves to the Frank Capra classic starring Jimmy Stewart and Jean Arthur. With more on the film and to lead the discussion, I turn the show over to James.
Thank you, Richard. I wanted to talk about this for a long time. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is one of those classic movies that has had an awful lot of influence on American culture, but whether anybody's actually seen it is a question. It stars James Stewart, although his name is not at the top of it's not top billing. Jean Arthur is. And it tells the story of a neophyte politician. He's not even a politician. He is appointed to become a senator when the incumbent senator dies in his state. And the political forces, the political machine of that state, want to put in, just a guy who will follow orders and vote the way they want to. But the governor of the state, at the urging of his children, decides he's going to go a little different and brings in Jefferson Smith, who is leads a Boy Rangers group in his state. And he's all gung-ho, patriotic, salt of the earth type. And after a little bit of argument, it is agreed that, yeah, maybe this kid can go in and fill the place. Maybe he's malleable. Maybe he'll toe the line. And the senior senator, Senator Payne, who's played by Claude Rains, decides, yeah, I'll be able to control him. He'll follow orders. Mm-hmm. And when he gets to Washington D.C., he's a little bit uncontrollable. Number one, his patriotic fervor for the ideals of America, and his small town guy in a big town city makes him go missing for a little while, and then he comes back and has to learn the ropes of what it means to be a senator in the United States. And at this point, because even though the film is 85 years old, and I'm a little leery about going into too much detail, but at some point he runs afoul of the plans of the political machine. And he is, basically the political machine has, go ahead.
I said, are you choosing your words?
Yeah, I'm choosing my words really carefully.
Yep.
I am not reading this. You can tell.
Sounds good.
But, basically, the political machine, which is run by a publisher named Jim Taylor, is played by Edward Arnold, has been buying up land around a section of the state called Willet Creek. It's somewhat reminiscent of the water wars in California earlier in the century. And they're going to build a dam at Willet Creek, and they freeze. And therefore, real estate prices will go up, and they're going to make a lot of graft because of it. Unbeknownst to Jefferson Smith, that's all going on in the background. And his idealized view of things is that he wants to build a boys' camp in precisely the same location for inner city kids to go spend some time in nature and find out what generally get out of the cities and get back to nature. Well, when he proposes that, the political machine goes a little nuts, and they go all in on trying to get him thrown out of the Senate. And at that point, the big conflict of the movie comes in, and at that point, I'll throw it to other people, get their general impressions of what Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is all about, and what it means to them. When was their first time seeing it, and what did they think of it when they saw it? So let's go to Damien, because he's alphabetical first.
Oh my gosh, that's so weird, because my new album is called Alphabetico. Isn't that weird?
Uh-huh.
I'm working on it right now. But anyhow,
good marketing, Damien.
No, and
it went right into my brain to suggest that.
This is called being in alignment politically. No, just kidding. So what a wonderful film. I'm one of those people who I kind of sold his soul to movies like at age 8 or 9, and I was just in shock that I haven't watched this James Stewart film. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah. Are you saying this is the first time you watched the movie?
Okay, you have to embarrass me and you have to rub it in, don't you? No. Yes, it is. I think we were in some kind of chat or so. I thought I already told you that, but yeah, I'm really excited that I got to see it. I will watch this one again. I'm a big fan of James Stewart, and the film is really a film for our time. I'm not even going to say times plural because it just it literally is a film like for the present moment. Like if you turn on if you turn on YouTube News or something, or wherever you get your news. I'm gonna choose my words. No, just kidding. Wonderful film, and really a film for our time, really is. And I started writing a little bit about it. I didn't get to finish because I was making an omelet, and that took precedent. Yep. But yes, but I'm definitely gonna finish my writing about it because it's just touched my heart, and it's a film that there's a lot of young people nowadays. I mean, I don't know, young is such a relative term, but there's really young people, like 17, 18-year-olds that are really getting into some of the old black and whites. And, that I know, my daughter, her friends and stuff. And so this one would be one, if you're in that category, if you're somebody that shops at thrift stores and kind of a retro, fedora wearing guy or gal, this is a must see, put it that way. And, wonderful cast, just glorious. I can't say enough good things about this film. I don't want to miniaturize it to say it's a Wonderful Life. I don't want to say that. But if you get a vibe from that Christmas movie, like a lot of people do, like I always have, you're gonna have a similar, I think, response to this film. It is Frank Capra film. So, right there, it's like, if you're a George Lucas fan, you're gonna like a Star Wars movie. If you're a Frank Capra fan, you're really gonna like this film. You probably, of course, have already seen it if you're a Frank Capra fan, unlike me yesterday. But it was just a joyful experience for me. And James was just, I'm a little confused. Did Rich pick this or did James pick this?
I picked this.
Okay. Well, I wanted to thank you then, because just at first I was like, oh gosh, okay, we're going generic old here.
That's me.
That describes two people on this show.
Which isn't always bad, but movies have a hedonic component. It's kind of like our sense of smell. We can smell something and just you're taken back, and that's really what this did for me. Not at first. Like when it first started, I was like, okay, I get it. Trying to make a patriotism film, I get it. But it has all the warmth of a family film, but at the same time, and yet there's a major edge to the guy that James Stewart plays, and that's really cool. And I mean, I think I've probably said too much, and I probably have not said enough, so I'll leave it there. But what a joy it was. So thank you, James, for picking it, and thank you for hosting as well.
Sure. Matthew, you're next alphabetically.
So, Damien, don't feel too bad, because I watched this movie for the first time yesterday.
Oh, nice.
My mission is accomplished. I'm getting this film into more people's heads.
And to be honest, like, this is part of the reason I love these Movie of the Month episodes, because they're all pretty much always either films I already love or great films I haven't seen, and it's sort of win-win. You know what I'm talking about?
That's right. The Lambcast always has just really quality stuff. That's true.
Yeah. So, I saw it for the first time yesterday, and I was really struck by the depiction of American politics, which all at once felt very real and very timely and very idealistic in a way that felt like it was pretty timeless. Maybe I was very struck by the naive guy goes up against a corrupt system. I'm surprised this movie hasn't been remade like a bazillion times.
Has been a couple of times.
Yeah, I think the most recent one
Billy
though is
Jack
what
goes to Washington comes to mind.
Yeah, and like The Distinguished Gentleman, I think is an 80s Eddie Murphy movie it's been remade as. And I think I'm just surprised it hasn't been remade recently. I feel like we're in times ripe for this to be remade, you know? But anyway, I very much enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed Jimmy Stewart doing his earnest Jimmy Stewart thing. I'm a big fan of Claude Rains, actually. I basically always enjoy him when I see him and stuff. And the other person I wanted to call out was, what is his name? The guy who plays reporter is
Thomas Mitchell.
Thomas Mitchell, who I also basically always enjoy. I thought he was a real highlight in this film as the reporter. But most of all, I haven't seen Jean Saunders in too much stuff, but I really enjoyed her in this movie. I really enjoyed her transformation, especially that one scene where she basically, Jimmy Stewart is speaking and she drinks the Kool-Aid, basically live on camera. And I really enjoyed her whole performance of going from the cynical, jaded, Hollywood Washington administrator to like true believer, in the face of like actual morals. And, I really enjoyed it. I know this film is like in the National Registry, and I can see why, because it's a good one.
It was one of the first ones voted in.
I know, right? So, and understandably so. Like, it's real interesting, and I think it is very sort of timely and realistic, whilst being idealistic about the process at the same time. And I think that's kind of actually a pretty difficult line to walk, without falling too far to one side of it. And I think it accomplishes that really well. So, I really enjoyed watching this film. I'm glad that it came up, and I'm glad that I finally seen it.
And Richard?
Well,
when was the first time you watched Mr. Smith Goes to Washington?
Difficult for me to remember the first time I saw this film. It must have been sometime when I was very young, either in junior high school or high school. I'm sure I saw it on television. I know that since college, I've seen it a half dozen times, once in a theater, but frequently it comes up as one of those films that I like to watch around the 4th of July holiday. I would classify myself as a patriot, as an idealistic kind of person. I'm the Jimmy Stewart character walking into the Lincoln Memorial, choking up on the words that I'm reading on the wall, looking at the statue and feeling, small in comparison to the people that came before us, and proud to be as part of that legacy simply by being an American. And watching all the people coming into the memorial in that early scene when Stewart's kind of entranced by showing up in D.C. and everybody is having these deep feelings, I'm going, that's me. That's exactly how I felt when I did these kinds of things. And I identified with Jefferson Smith, even though he's, obviously idealistic and, motivated by his ideals to do something, and it takes on this responsibility somewhat sheepishly, admittedly, but he gets mercilessly chewed up by the system. And it's not just the political system, it's also the media that chews him up, and it's also the bureaucracy that's part of the process. And the only ones who seem to be able to connect with him, or that he seems to be able to connect with, are the kids, which is what got him there in the first place. And that's another one of those things that, as a former Boy Scout, I appreciate all of the things that he's talking about and why he wants to have this national camp for boys, and what's going on is his desire to pursue that. Now, of course, the political intrigue and the graft, I think that that's been part of the political process since the dawn of time.
Yeah.
That people take whatever power they have and use it to benefit themselves in some way, shape, or form. Do they compromise themselves? I tell you what, to me, the whole arc of the story is about Senator Payne, not about Jefferson Smith. Jefferson Smith is the center of the story, but Payne is the one that goes through a change. He has to recognize himself in Jefferson Smith and recognize what he's become, and at the climax of the film has to take a plunge and declare that he's not going to continue to be that kind of person. And I Claude Rains has been one of my favorite actors forever. When we get to the exit question that James has come up with, you'll be hearing a lot more about that.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm a sucker for all of the Frank Capra movies. You know, they call them Capricorn because they're kind of corny. And I got to be honest with you, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. Here's one of those old man moments. There's a word that I use 1,000 times a day that I can't find right now.
Nice guy.
You know,
how's that?
it's kind of it. You know, I'm the kind of person that can be easily moved by the right kind of emotions.
I don't know. I feel like the criticism of films like this being corny is oversimplifying too. Like this movie's maybe corny is a word, but I think sincere is a better one. Like, and there's nothing wrong with sincerity.
Oh, I agree.
I feel like we like look down on that. Like, I feel like, especially a lot of like sort of film bro culture really looks down on sincerity in a way that I find kind of troubling.
They tend to, they being the movie intelligentsia, tend to look at it as a sentimentality.
That's the word I was looking for, by the way.
Okay.
Sentimentalist.
Every time somebody discusses a John Ford film, they always have to say, well, of course, he's very sentimental at places. Well, yeah, that's part of the point. You can have sentiment. You can have real emotions. You can speak emotional truth in a movie without, sacrificing your, intellectual pursuits in making a movie.
Well,
you can't touch the heart.
There's also more emotions than just anger.
Yes, or cynicism, or
despair.
Yeah, and gosh, Mr. Smith goes through all of those 7 stages of grief at some point throughout the movie. I first saw this movie in college, and what was really interesting about it was right after Watergate. And I was Watergate, if you don't know, was the scandal involving Richard Nixon in 1974, where he ultimately was humiliated out of office before he was actually impeached. For you younger listeners out there. So I'd say about 1974, 75 is when I saw this movie. And I was struck by, just like Damien said, the timelessness of this. I thought the movie could have been made yesterday. And that's what is truly striking to me about this movie, that it does have a timeless quality, because it speaks to the conflict between the idealist and the folks who game the system for their own gain. When I chose this as one of my anytime movies, a movie that you can't interrupt me when I'm watching this movie, because I'm going to be watching it to the end and I won't be interrupted.
I'm like that with Nacho Libre.
Yeah.
I'm happily joking, but that's wonderful that you connect with it like that. I think that's so
each
neat.
to his own, I say.
I'm joking, but I do.
But this another thing. I got the same feeling when I was watching The West Wing on TV. The sense of patriotism, the big ideals over the machinations that tend to threaten to undercut what those ideals are, and the reverence for public service is just infused in that. And I guess it's the 25th anniversary of West Wing now. They just had a big to-do at the White House for the cast.
Oh.
But it's that idealism of looking at the idea of a populist government where the leaders are chosen by the people being governed, which was somewhat revolutionary at a time when the world was being led by potentates and kings and royalty. And the fact that this nation was founded on a refutation of the divine right of kings is the thing that makes this country special. And even the founding fathers acknowledged at the time of the writing of the Constitution that we were endeavoring to form a more perfect union, which implies that it's never going to be perfect, but we're going to gradually, evolutionally, make this a more better society based on the ideals of humanism.
Yeah. There's no other government that has, set out to do such a thing. It's wonderful.
That's why I was almost railroaded out of here.
Oh my God. That's some talent right there.
Mr. Smith, when it first came out, was not universally loved. It was by the movie-going public. But when it premiered in Washington, D.C., it was actually a lot of people said the movie should never have been made because it made the government look corrupt. Joseph P. Kennedy, who was the American ambassador to Great Britain, said that Mr. Smith Goes to Washington would damage America's prestige in Europe. It was decried on the Senate floor that it was, who is the senator who said something? Premiered at Constitution Hall, Washington, D.C. on October 17, 1939, sponsored by the National Press Club, who also didn't look good, the film. In his book, The Name Above the Title, his autobiography, Frank Capra recounts how when he was right after the premiere, one of the press corps, obviously deep in his cups, came up to him and said, "How come you made us all look like a bunch of drunks?" And it was attacked by the Washington press, politicians in the U.S. Congress as anti-American and pro-communist socialist for its portrayal of corruption in the American government. There were also Albert W. Barkley, a Democrat, and the Senate Majority Leader called the film silly and stupid and said it makes the Senate look like a bunch of crooks. And also said that the film was a grotesque distortion of the Senate, as grotesque as anything ever seen. Imagine the Vice President of the United States winking at a pretty girl in the gallery in order to encourage a filibuster. It showed the Senate as the biggest aggregation of nincompoops on record.
How's that different?
Yeah, well, exactly. But the film was loved by moviegoers. It did very well at the box office, even in that year of 1939 when they had Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz and Stagecoach and all those other classic films being made. The film was banned in Hitler's Germany, Mussolini's Italy, and in Franco's Spain. In the Soviet Union, the film was released to cinemas in 1950 as The Senator. But the most telling thing is that in 1942, when France was occupied by the Nazis, a lot of the theaters in France chose to show Mr. Smith Goes to Washington as the last movie before the ban went into effect. And one theater owner in Paris reported screening the film nonstop for 30 days after the ban was announced. It really is timeless. It is a film that inspires, even if it does look at the failings of what the government in the micro managed to do. Let's just throw open the floor. Does anybody want to be recognized about anything that in particular struck them about the movie?
Will the senator yield for a comment?
I will yield.
All right. Well, I'm going to take the floor and kind of switch gears here. We've talked about the political aspects of the film quite a bit, and kind of some of the ideology and some of the cynicism that's included here. I thought maybe it would be a good time to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the performers in the film, because I think that we have a cast here that is pretty damn amazing. The people in this film represent the cream of the crop of 1930s acting talent. You've got a ton of people here who, Harry Carey, H.B. Warner, Eugene Pallett, Thomas Mitchell, Guy Kibbe, Edward Arnold, Claude Rains, Jimmy Stewart, Jean Arthur. Holy criminy, it's just incredible how deep it goes here when you're looking at all of the great character actors and stars that are in this movie, and they're all really good. There's not anybody in the film that I think, well, that person was miscast or they're just phoning it in. This is one where everybody was doing their job as professionals in the movie factory did in those days. Maybe they weren't always enamored of the roles that they played, but that was the job that they had, and they generally did a good job of it. But I especially like, the main leads in the film. But I was thinking along the lines, you mentioned Thomas Mitchell earlier. I think Edward Arnold is excellent as Jim Taylor, the malevolent force behind the political machine in the home state that never gets named. And I think that Thomas Mitchell is the cynical, drunkard journalist that works perfectly in the film. He has a thing for Saunders, and he's interested in her. But he's not pushing it. It's kind of a side issue, and she responds to him sort of the same way. They've got a friendship. I think it's funny that Beulah Bondi is Jimmy Stewart's mother, like a dozen times over the years. Maybe it's not that many, but it seems like it's that many. 4 or 5 times in the movies over the years. And I don't remember if this is the first time, but it certainly isn't the last.
I can see in the contract. You do agree to play a mother role when the protagonist or when one of the characters in the movie is James Stewart. You must play his mother. Now that's part of the contract. Now,
but I see myself more as an ingenue. Right down to the roles that don't have many lines. One of my favorite character actors is Jack Carson, and he's in this movie.
Oh,
William
yeah,
Demarest is in this movie. And oh gosh, who's? I'm scrolling through IMDb looking for his name, and of course I won't find it because
what's the part?
He doesn't. He's one of the reporters.
You're talking about Charles Lane, aren't you?
Charles Lane? No.
Okay.
I'm talking about somebody else who has a really familiar face and that became much more popular when he was an older guy. We'll just move on.
All right.
We'll table that discussion. And
about 3 or 4. So
yeah,
like the guy, the bank examiner guy with the glasses, so the real thin guy with the gizzard neck.
yeah.
Anyway,
all of these guys are really good. I mean, this movie moves so fast, despite that, despite the the amount of talking in this film. It's amazing how fast Capra just cuts from scene to scene with these extraordinary quick wipes across the screen. That's what struck me when I watched it again on Friday. It just moves at a clip. And the montages are like MTV headache inducing. They pile so much into those montages that it's incredible.
That sequence where they're showing the big newspapers putting out their version of the story, and then the little boys' newspaper putting together theirs, and they cut back and forth between those sequences and the distribution. They build that story so well, and they're just doing it in a minute and a half montage.
Yeah.
I actually think the same thing about the montage where Stewart reads the paper and then goes out and punches all the reporters in the face.
Yes.
which honestly, must be so satisfying. But also, it's like someone says it to him, but then from the moment he reads the headline, it's basically this wordless, well acted silent theater, and I loved every second of that one. Not just because reporters are getting punched in the face, but because you could really tell the whole story from everybody's body language. I thought it was great.
You know what's funny? If you don't mind me just jumping in just real quick here. I was actually thinking about saying this at some point. This is probably a good point. Good time to make the point. When I was younger, I don't know, I guess when my parents would make me watch It's a Wonderful Life, so I probably was about, 6 or 7, I guess. There was something about James Stewart that I didn't understand his tension. If you think, I didn't understand why he was this gangly guy that everybody thought it was so amazing. I liked the feel of It's a Wonderful Life, but I always felt like this guy with the dollop of hair, I don't know. I just didn't understand it when I was a child. But as I got older, and I was the guy with the dollop of hair, and I was the gangly adult trying to get through life, then all of a sudden I got him, and he's like an everyman, So I just want to throw that in there because I think, everybody loves James Stewart. I mean, of course. I mean, he was on Johnny Carson. I remember the tail end of his life. There's some great stuff on YouTube, like interviews with him. And he just became like this Robert Frost of, Hollywood. Like everybody was just hanging on any wisdom that he would offer. And he just, I really like him a lot. Of course, everybody does. But what I'm saying is it's almost like you have to sort of go through a little bit of tragedy and being torn in your life. I remember him in Harvey, just blew my mind. You see a guy there who's very gangly, but also vulnerable, and I think you really have to sort of be vulnerable yourself and maybe go through something politically, where you have your dreams dashed. All you want to do is take the young boys camping, and teach them, about Half Dome or, that was so beautiful what he wanted. His desire was so pure, but then when he got in there, it's like, what's what the rest of us see? So the rest, we love that idea. And even some of the people, when he said it, what he wanted to do is, I love the scenes where he's so nervous too. So I just wanted to kind of just shine a little light on that, sort of the way I've come to view James Stewart, as I become an adult, as I become a man. Just kidding.
Yeah. As I become a man.
Yeah.
I think you had the perfect word for Jimmy Stewart, which is tension.
Yeah.
Yes, he's aw shucks, and yes, he's gangly, and yes, he chooses his words carefully and stammers and stutters and all that, but there's a tension there. There's a neurotic there. He's almost bipolar at some points. Absolutely. Especially when he's doing the filibuster scene. I mean, there's some real tension. Right. And, there's fury when he's going after those reporters. And that's an aspect that really good directors would use later on in his career. It's a Wonderful Life is nothing without James Stewart going through hell on earth.
Yeah, people think of him as being positive and upbeat. He's got a dark side in all of his best roles, and that dark side comes out here a couple of times. You know, certainly the desperation sequence when he's confronted by all the supposed messages from his home state. But I think the one that Matthew just pointed out, where he is infuriated by the way he's been humiliated by the reporters and the disdain, and then also the sadness when he realizes, you know what, maybe they aren't all that wrong, because I shouldn't be here in the first place. I am a neophyte, you know, wet behind the ears. What is it that why do I think I deserve to be treated like as anything other than a bumpkin? And so he conveys that honestly, you know, that there isn't, not everything is sunshine and light, and everything isn't going to necessarily go well. And I think people have this stereotyped version of Jimmy Stewart because of that aw shucks, stammering sort of delivery, and you've got to have the dark side in order to make that work.
And that was exploited by Anthony Mann and Hitchcock in the 50s.
Yep.
And to the point where, you know, you seriously questioned that aw shucks quality. But, you know, then he'd go off and make Harvey, or he'd make something, you know, much lighter, to keep the image full. John Ford would use him use that dark side as well. He's a really good, very honest actor, and you know, it gets you on his side very early on in the movie.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna sit here and say, what a versatile actor. I mean, he's the actor.
Yeah, really, really good, and not afraid to, you know, push the boundaries of his public image.
Okay.
Anything else? The floor is still open. Any other aspects of this movie that you want to talk about? Any scenes that you were particularly taken by? Anything? Impressions that you were watching this film for the first time?
For me, I think I already mentioned it once, but there's that scene where Jimmy Stewart is talking about the things he wants to do, and Jean Arthur, like I said, basically drinks the Kool-Aid of, like, idealism in real time. And I have not seen Jean Arthur in a ton of things, but I thought that scene, like, first of all, Jimmy Stewart is great in that scene, and he's doing his most Jimmy Stewart performance, I think, in the whole movie, where he's just, like, you know, very emotionally and empathetically, and for lack of a better word, very manly, talking about, like, you know, the ideals of the American way and stuff like that. And I think in that scene, she's incredible, and I think it's actually one of the best scenes of what I like to call face acting I've seen in, like, recent months, where you can basically see the change come over her, and it's totally wordless, but you can watch it happen in real time as he's speaking. And I always find that to be a really special thing, a really hard thing to get right for many actors. And I just really appreciate how well she pulls it off in that scene. And it's a little bit, again, we're going to go back to that word corny. It's a little bit corny because she's really, like, lit with soft light, and it's really hammered home by the cinematography and the production. But, like, that shouldn't take away from the fact of, like, how good that moment is for her as an actor. And I feel like it's really emblematic of the whole film, too. Like, it's very much...
I'm going to play the annoying role, and I'm going to say, why? I totally agree with you, but I'm just trying to... I'm just so into this idea that you're going down. Because one thing that I think about it is that, like, what we see, like Rich was talking about her kind of quirky relationship with the bumbling reporter guy.
Mm-hmm.
How he's like, well, you know, and like with absolutely no rise in blood pressure going, you know, my offer of marriage is still on the table, you know. And so you just go, oh, wow. You know, they've discussed things before. And she's just like completely unaffected by it. You know, just like, oh yeah, well, that's not going to happen, but whatever, you know. I mean, I mean, how many of us guys, I know me, have been in that situation, you know, don't have a prayer, you know, and that's kind of where he's at. But she is so strong as a woman. At that point, she's almost like, oh yeah, man, you know, I've been watching a lot of Perry Mason lately. I don't know if you guys really know that, but
Yes.
you know, yeah. So like, God, what's the really cute, his assistant's name? I can't remember.
Della Street.
Della Street.
Della Street, that's right. You know, it's a similar to her role because, you know, the other guy, I'm forgetting all the names now. Here I'm an authority and I forget the name, but the guy he hires to, you know, go out and check things out all the time, the blonde guy. He's always coming in and saying, hello, beautiful, you know, and I mean, that was basically the role of women at that time was, you know, hello, beautiful. Of course, this is much later. This is what I think, Raymond Burr just recently died, didn't he?
Many years ago.
About 20 years ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's my world. I don't know what day it is. But anyhow, you know what I'm saying? It's like the women, they held everything together and they were the ones that the men just wanted to rest their chin on, so to speak, and marry them and all that. But they had to, you know, just kind of go, well, that ain't gonna happen, but here, let me take care of you anyway. And then that's really what happened in the workplace, and that's really what happened, I think, with that moment you're talking about. And that's why I said why. It's like, what is it about her drinking the Kool-Aid, which you've mentioned, I think, a couple times? It's interesting to me, but I'm not exactly sure. I'm not really exactly sure what you mean by drinking the Kool-Aid. Like, is she?
So
Maybe it's just the way I've got Skype configured.
Yeah. Anyway, just my point was just to close it up. It was kind of an open-ended question to him, but
what he means is that basically she's shedding her cynicism at that point, and you know, recognizing that the idealism that Jefferson Smith has isn't necessarily a bad thing, isn't necessarily the wrong way to go. And of course, it's the tipping point when she starts falling for him, when she, you know, instead of seeing him as a bumpkin, sees him as an idealist and somebody who is deserving of respect, even if he's not the most experienced or capable person on the floor. That doesn't necessarily mean that he isn't maybe the best person on the floor. And I think that's kind of what Matthew's talking about when we say he's, you know,
drinking
that she's drinking the Kool-Aid.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's I just really respected all his comments. I was just trying to open it up and just say like, well, let's talk about what different Kool-Aids might be. You know what, and I think really honestly, it's so neat. First of all, I thought she was really beautiful. It kept coming home to me. And just, you know, so is Della. And speaking of, you know, comparing it to Perry Mason, you know, we had a lot of beautiful women through the years. And I think they're black and white, but Perry Mason was later, a lot later. I think it was like late 50s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, it was similar because here she is at a desk and yet she's running the emotions of the whole enterprise. You know what I mean? And so I just felt like this woman was, you know, I haven't really watched The West Wing, but I get a feeling, you know, you see some of that in there too. Like, you know, people are sort of keeping everybody together, but not really recognized. And in politics, like the campaign manager, like would be that, you know?
Exactly.
So, yeah, really cool stuff.
Jean Arthur is, if you've never seen many of her movies, she's one of those actresses like Barbara Stanwyck.
That's a good way. That's a good comparison, I think.
Who could be easily overlooked, but the more you see of them and what they're capable of and their performances in different films, Jean Arthur was always spot on as far as you know, nailing the character. And she also had one of those faces that the camera just let you see every emotion that was on her face, whether she betrayed it or not. And she was lightning quick as far as being able to change emotions in her face, one of my favorite scenes in this movie is her drunk scene, where that came about through discussion with Howard Hawks, with Capra and Hawks, where they were talking about how Capra said, how do you do that kind of dialogue where they're not talking about what they're really talking about? And Howard Hawks said, well, I call that a 3-corner shot, like in pool, where they'll dance around the issue and then finally get around to what they're talking about. And that's a prime example of that, where they're talking about, she's talking about everything that's kind of wrong about Jefferson Smith, and it's not the idealism that she wants to portray, and she's expressing her doubts about, how she's feeling at this moment, because she likes Jimmy Stewart. She's even quoting things that Jimmy Stewart is saying. She's enamored with that idealism, but she is fighting the cynicism that is her learned state in her job. And that's her character arc. When we meet her, she's threatening to quit every 20 seconds. But when it comes down to brass tacks and Jimmy Stewart is being thrown out of the Senate, she's the one who tells him not to quit, that he's got to fight. It's subtle and not so subtle at the same time. It's a big, big thing when you realize it. But
Geoffrey Chaucer taught us in The Wife of Bath Tale that the secret, that women hold, this is Chaucer, you talk about going way back. He said, and I'm not saying, ladies, I'm not saying this is true. Too bad we don't have a lady on the panel today to, rebut this, but he said that women want to be in charge, but only behind the scenes. In the home. But out in public, they want to look subservient. So that's a Chaucer thing. She clearly is like the leader of all emotions in that whole movie, really. I mean, she's like the voice of reason that says, hey, kids, we need to sit down and talk about this, And right. I think that's wonderful. I just think that's so wonderful how they did. Now, I think it's a little bit maybe not true, maybe not realistic for the time, because I don't know, because I wasn't back there. I wasn't in 1939, but I kind of feel like, the bumbling fool men were actually a little bit more kind of like, well, you just settle down, this is how it should be, because, it's a lot of chauvinism, in that time. But,
well, the men all represent ego. They're all wrapped up in themselves.
True. That's all I wanted to say. True.
And she's not.
No, I was gonna chime in and say something about Jean Arthur again, but it sounds like James basically covered what I was gonna say. That she's able to go through that whole gamut of emotion, and it's really the moment where she transitions from being a cynical operator to a true believer, and you get to see all of it on her face, and I thought that was great.
Yeah,
that right there that your Kool-Aid was cynical operator to true believer. Wonderful. Well, very well succinctly put.
And again, check out Jean Arthur in her career. She's just an amazing actress with an enormous range, and she can be funny as hell too. It's just she's just great. Any other aspects we want to take a look at?
Well, I do think it's interesting that they did some filming in Washington, and I read that they didn't get approval for a lot of these sequences that they recorded in D.C. They couldn't get approval, so it was kind of a style of guerrilla filmmaking early on in the process. I like that. Yeah. I like that idea. And even though there are several of those process rear projection kinds of shots, there are also some that are clearly filmed at the locations, and I think that that gives the movie some honesty and integrity that otherwise it would be lacking. I think they did a fabulous job designing the Senate chamber. I understand it's a pretty accurate representation. I did tour the Capitol many years ago, and it didn't seem like that was unsimilar, although there was probably some cosmetic modifications, but otherwise, it's an accurate representation of what the chambers look like.
Isn't it funny now because, we're so used to seeing it on C-SPAN, that it's like when they're voting and stuff, where they show the nays and the yays and you sit there and wait and watch in real time. It's like, okay, not surprising, but yeah, you're right. Back then they had to kind of resort to what you called like guerrilla filmmaking in a way to get in there, to really show, to represent it. So it was probably one of the early examples of realism with government.
And I'm sure that the reality of Washington, D.C. today is that nobody's going to get Daniel Webster's desk.
No.
What a topic today, it's like, wow, I'm holding back, believe me.
Yes.
Well, you'll see what I really think. It's a bunch of F words.
The one thing that I wanted to bring up was the ending.
Good ending.
Anybody have any thoughts on the ending and how the story is resolved?
Well, I do think that it's resolved pretty effectively. I understand that they had a longer sequence and other events that went along with it that they cut out. I think that probably made sense. It does feel a little abrupt because it does end with Senator Payne, confessing and revealing his part in the whole plot and basically vindicating Jefferson Smith. And that's the point that you need. And we did get an earlier moment when Saunders is on the phone with Jefferson Smith's mother and is all excited that calls her Clarissa. And I think that kind of resolves some of that emotional connection that we might want to have pay off at the end of the movie. We know that it's there. We don't have to see it at that point.
Uh-huh. One of the things I was worried about, anytime you bring up an old movie for discussion, I always fear that the subject of corniness is going to come up. I don't have, we resolved that issue fairly early on in this talk. But one of the things that struck me in this film, after I did some digging, is, as Richard alluded to, there was more. There was another scene that was filmed, and the screenplay is available on the internet, and you can read that scene. There was going to be a later scene that ended the movie where Jefferson Smith goes back to his hometown of Jackson City, where James Stewart is being lauded by his the populace of Jackson City. He's been completely vindicated, and Jean Arthur is by his side in the car, and it's like a ticker tape parade, and even Senator Payne is sitting in the car looking somewhat mollified. But it's a celebratory scene where everybody is it's an unequivocally happy ending in which all the loose ends are tied up. There's even publicity shots of it that you can find on the internet, and that scene was also featured in a lobby card for the film, which you can find. So it is there. It was shot. It was going to be in the movie. Capra cut it. And he cut it for a reason. He cut it because he wanted there to be something open-ended. There is, yes, Senator Payne is thunderstruck by guilt and shame, and tries to commit suicide out in the hallway, and then he makes a full Perry Mason, coming back to Perry Mason, confession at the end that I did it, I'm the one who should be good. But at the same time, all of his Senate compadres are going, Joe, just, calm down. It's gonna be all right. You're fine. Everything is good. So there's that tension of, is everything resolved? Is everything all right? And it's really not. Because, it looks like on the surface, Jefferson Smith is vindicated, but it's not. And
they also haven't dismantled the machine at this point, right?
Yeah. Well, you don't know. Jim Taylor could say whatever he wants. Capra ends it on confusion and chaos, and the whole everything being up in the air and unresolved, which I think is absolutely amazing, especially for Capra, who liked things unequivocally spelled out and clear and on a happy note, which is another thing I love about this movie, that it leaves you feeling good, but it also leaves you up in the air about what's going to happen.
Well, that's another 40 minutes worth of storyline that they just don't have time for, and it's not really the point of the film. So I can see why that they would make the decision to cut that out. The movie is probably a little longer than most of the films coming out that year. The main exception being Gone with the Wind, which was twice as long.
Yes.
So it's probably one of those things. I said, we've gone over 2 hours. We have our story, the main characters wrapped up for the most part. We're maybe not going to resolve everything. That would, if it's a miniseries, you do that. But they didn't make miniseries in 1939.
No. Nor trilogies. So, but
so you want to give everybody one last bite at the apple here before we take our break?
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody have any other thing they noticed that they wanted to point out?
I mean, we've basically covered everything that I would like to cover. I really enjoyed the juxtaposition of cynicism and idealism in this film. And I think that's probably what makes it feel so timeless and timely still, even though it was made 85 years ago. And I kind of can't believe I haven't seen it before, and I'm very glad that I did.
Damien, you've got some final thoughts here?
Oh, just joyful experience. I can't express enough how much this film is about our times. I don't want to say times. I want to say our time right now. And, I'm going to obviously write about it. So I've already started a little bit. I'm trying to keep it tame. But, guys, we're an experiment here, And I'm really glad that James picked it. And I think it's, I did not expect it to be this relevant to what I'm going through with family and friends. And I think we all are. It's like, we need to get over it and look at it as an experiment. So, wonderful film. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Richard?
Yeah, I think the film is timeless. It, as long as our government works the way that it does, and as long as people either exploit it or respect it, we're going to have those kinds of conflicts coming up. And I like the idea that, once in a while you need to look behind the curtain and see and say, let's hope that there's somebody who is idealistic enough to challenge the conventions that are going on. The movie, I think, like I said, I'm a sentimentalist. I think it hits the right emotions for me. And every time I see it, I feel that I'm a lucky person that I got a chance to see it and that I get to live here. So
I would also just chime in and say that as I think, lone Canadian in the group.
Yes.
That
yes,
it is a very uniquely the setting and structure of everything is very uniquely American, but also like this could easily be like Mr. Smith Goes to Ottawa or Mr. Smith Goes to London. Like it's very, it's very singular in its Americanness, but it would be very easy to adapt it for Canadianness or Britishness or Frenchness, because like every government to some extent has some of the same problems, right? Like, so I think despite being so American, it is also quite universal, which I think makes it pretty special.
And I'll just reinforce the timeless arguments that you made here. I think this is a movie that is essential. I think this should be shown in schools. I think this is one of those movies that will bring all sides together with its emphasis on cynicism, but it's also idealism. And it's one of the essential movies that Hollywood made, and I think it will continue to be timeless for as long as there are governments and movies.
I like your phrase of it being essential. I think that it is an essential film, and that's essentially why I let it get chosen, because I think we should be covering all of those movies. We're going to take a quick break here to hear from a fellow Lamb Podcasting Network show, and then we're going to come back with the exit question for the week.
Do you like learning hard facts about people's career and personal life?
Yeah.
Do you want to hear people's achievements and dirty, dirty disgraces?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to hear filthy movie summaries and a lot of foul language?
Oh, yes.
Want to guess who's dead based on a list of interesting facts?
Wait, what are you doing?
Oh, hey guys. I'm just making a commercial for our podcast, Rehearsing Around.
But it's a podcast where we speak of the recently deceased celebrities?
Yeah, and we play a game called Are You As Brain Dead As They Are, where I do my best to leave Izzy, Chris, and Brenda unfulfilled.
Yeah, we do put the fun in funeral, don't we?
But why the hell does this sound like a phone sex ad?
Yeah, are we sure we really want to go this route?
Listen, guys, there are two things in this world that never waver in income, and that's sex and death. Sex sells, and we're talking about death. We're cornering the market with this ad.
Nothing good will
Yes,
come of
sure.
it.
You can find us at rabbitholepodcast.com or wherever you find your sexy podcast by looking for Rehearsing Around. That's HEARSING, and we'll see you around.
We're back, and it's time for our exit question of the week. It's actually a very open-ended exit question. James was asking, he came up with these questions. So I'm going to let you tell us, James, what the exit question is.
Perfect.
I'm trying to remember what they are.
Okay, let me. Here's what are your favorite Jimmy Stewart roles? Your favorite Jean Arthur roles? And were there any actors in Mr. Smith that made a particular impression, or a scene that made a particular impression? I think we talked about the scenes already, but let's talk about the actors. And I'm going to say, I'm going to take your question and treat it. Not only do you have a favorite Jimmy Stewart role or a favorite Jean Arthur role, do you have a favorite role for other characters in the film or other actors in the film? And I'm willing to start because I've already tipped my hand on this.
Go for it.
Well, Claude Rains is a fantastic actor. The original Invisible Man was his debut talkie. He had one part in a silent film before that movie, but and I think personally, The Invisible Man is maybe my favorite of the Universal Monster movies. I really enjoy the heck out of it. I'm amused by it continuously, and Claude Rains is primarily a vocal actor in the film. He doesn't appear until right at the end of the movie. It's an amazing performance there. Look, Claude Rains is in. If I look at my list, I didn't count the number, but he's in 3 of my top favorite films of all time.
No way.
Yeah.
So let me guess, because I think they might be mine too. So it's going to be The Invisible Man, and Casablanca, and The Adventures of Robin Hood.
Casablanca, The Adventures of Robin Hood, and Lawrence of Arabia.
Lawrence of Arabia.
Ah, Lawrence of Arabia. Nice. That's in there as well. So I guess he's in 4 of mine.
He's all over the place.
Monsters on Maple Street, Twilight Zone episode. Love him in that. He's like coaching the crowd to not riot against each other.
Wow, I don't remember him being in that episode. I
got the wrong episode, but he's, they think it ends up being aliens, but the people turn on each other. I
know the episode. I just didn't remember Claude Rains being in it.
Oh, maybe I got a different actor in my mind.
He's in. I think you may be thinking of Simon Oakland, but
no, I'm thinking of Claude Rains. But I'll look it up. That's cool.
I know he was in Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
I do this stuff all the time. When I write my reviews, sometimes I go, "You remember that guy? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about." So anyway, but yeah, I'm gonna look it up. Go ahead, talk.
All right. So, like I said, I think Claude Rains is great. In this period of time, between, let's say, the film that we were just talking about, 1939, and a decade later, he was nominated for supporting actor 4 times. He probably deserved to win at least twice, and he was just phenomenal. And he's got such a great voice. The Adventures of Robin Hood is my favorite film, and as Prince John, he is just a feat malevolence that is just amazing, and I think he's great. I love the little things that he does in that movie. The way he picks at the pomegranate seeds with the knife, like he is doing the same thing. It's a metaphor for what he's doing to England. I'm just going to pick out the juicy parts and keep them for myself. And it's just so great. And so anytime I see him in the cast of a movie, I'm ready to spend some time with that particular movie.
And you were correct. You guys were correct. I feel so stupid even drawing it. Yeah. You got it. Typical Bonanza watcher here. Or that kind of guy. Anyways, carry on.
Have you ever seen Now Voyager, Richard?
Yes, I have.
Oh, God, he's good in that.
He's good. He's good in everything. Yeah. And we mentioned Thomas Mitchell a little bit. Just as a side note, Thomas Mitchell was in 4 of these movies that were like that just got mentioned as the Best Picture nominees for 1939, and in the classics. He's in Gone with the Wind. He's in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He won the Supporting Actor Award for Stagecoach. He's just incredible, and everybody remembers him as Uncle Billy in It's a Wonderful Life, but he was terrific in a lot of films. And this, it's interesting also that the part of the Senate president, who is presumably the vice president, Harry Carey, he was nominated for this picture, and his role, half of what he does on screen is just kind of rubbing the side of his nose and smiling and winking and smirking, and it's not a huge dialogue part. I think he was terrific in this picture. All right, so I've jumped in, giving you my 2 cents worth. Let's add to the kitty. You add your 2 cents in, and maybe we'll get a boys' camp built someplace.
Okay, well, when I speak on a movie this old, I really don't have a whole lot of 1930s presence or consciousness. So I'm just going to admit that right away. But what I will say is that maybe I'm speaking for people like, that really don't know 40s or 50s or even 60s. You're going to see a lot of people from It's a Wonderful Life. That was kind of like going to be my joke thing to say. It's a whole cast that I'm bringing up. Like the people that jump in here, and I already talked about it a little bit, but Uncle whatever with all the strings tied around his fingers, and, you're just going to see, because I assume the studio and Frank Capra probably just brought, the same people. You see that a lot in old movies. But yeah, just, it's like I said in my opener, it gives you that same sort of good-hearted vibe that It's a Wonderful Life gives you. It's a lot darker. Well, how can you get darker than suicide, actually? It's a Wonderful Life covers suicide. But, I just like, just the time that I was exposed to it, it was a little kid decorating the Christmas tree. So I think of it as real light film. But yeah, you're going to get that same kind of feeling. So like, hey, young guys, young people out there, really, I mean, I wouldn't have seen this if it had not been for Movie of the Month, because I'm always so fixated on horror, but I'm so glad that you picked it and I got to see it. And I don't expect anybody out there that doesn't like 1930s movies to see it, but really I vouch for it, and it's really worth watching. I guess in some ways you could say it's horror. Our political system in a lot of ways is kind of horror.
Yes, the scabrous underbelly of our idealism.
Yeah, and just like having that shoot up right in front of you, like how much bullshit there is, and then to like think how far afield we are from that now. Like if you think of the Republicans that I started voting for, Bush Senior was the first time I was old enough to vote, and I voted for Bush Senior. And my parents were into Reagan and all that. Well, now my whole family is staunchly Democrat, so, and, I'm not going to get into what I am, but I think most people know. And so the thing is watching this, it almost makes you want to cry, because you see a purity that does not exist anymore. And so that's really kind of the bummer of it, but at the same time, maybe we could bring it back. So that's all for me.
Well, that's a little bit off of the exit question, but it addresses some of those issues that we talked about earlier. Matthew, did you have some actors that you wanted to single out and talk about?
Yeah, you took mine. I was going to talk about Claude Rains.
How rude of me, sorry.
But that's okay. You talked a little bit about The Adventures of Robin Hood and Lawrence of Arabia. I would talk about, he's a scene stealer in Casablanca. He's a scene stealer in Notorious, I would say. He's wonderful as the Invisible Man. He also shows up in The Wolfman, which I had kind of forgotten about when I was reading that yesterday. But I just think every time he speaks a line, basically, every time he speaks a line becomes somehow iconic. Which is how, like, there's Casablanca has that a couple of iconic lines, but for me, it's always the, like, I'm shocked that gambling is happening. And, like, I cannot picture anyone else saying that line so effectively. As he's being handed his winnings. He's such a perfect actor for the parts he seems to play. And he seems to always be perfectly cast.
I'll just ramble on.
Yeah.
In mine, and we'll get there.
That's fine.
So, as far as actors that I'd like to talk about in this movie, mine, Richard, you mentioned him, Harry Carey. Harry Carey was John Ford's version of John Wayne in the silent Western era. He was the guy who always starred in John Ford Westerns. And he was one of those actors who, in the silent era, he also had one of those faces that the camera loves, and that it's proven again in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He was able to act, but not theatrically act, in silent movies. And still have audiences be able to read the expression on his face without him having to overemphasize what he was overemphasize his acting. And he's just, for the amount of screen time that he has in this movie, he makes the most of it with doing the simplest things. And it's not a coincidence that Frank Capra leaves you in this movie looking at Harry Carey because he's like the figure of authority in this film. But he's not stuffy about it. He does his job. He's the voice of reason, and he's also, for the purposes of the Senate chamber, the guy in charge. And Carrie manages to do this very simply, very easily, with a minimum of shots. And he's just an amazing actor. He's you can also see him in Red River, Howard Hawks' Western, and lots of other things. Hitchcock wanted to use him, but his wife, who was very protective of his image, told him not to take the role of the ringleader of the terrorists in Foreign Correspondent. He's just a great actor. Another person you should check out in watching movies.
Well, I think that we've talked quite a while about both Mr. Smith and all of the actors in the film. I've enjoyed this conversation very much. I want to give everybody a chance here to promote whatever it is that they think people should turn their eyes and ears to on their own sites and products. So Matthew, are you able to join us?
I'm not sure, am I?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll start with you in case we have an incident. We'll just close it off then.
Well, sorry again for being the one with all the technical difficulties this week.
It happens.
I write and podcast quite a bit, so the easiest way to find all of that is with my personal portfolio website, which is at stretched.ca. But mainly you can also search for the Awesome Friday podcast anywhere that podcasts are podcasted, in which we review 2 new movies every week that we publish. And also, as a shout out to a fellow Lamb member, this week that this episode's going out, I'll also be on the Movie Rob Minute all week talking about Die Hard 3. Should be pretty fun.
Oh, yes.
Nice.
Good deal. Damien, what have you got that people could look at or
just like
to?
we did the Call of the Wild, I moving into kind of just a side category where I read a chapter in a classic novel and then kind of just talk about it, but really it's more like an online diary. Like the way I've been on this show is kind of how I am, like times 1,000 I just go all over the place. I don't even have notes. Sometimes I'll write on my wall, but other than that, I don't believe in notes. So anyway, I'm doing the Time Machine currently. I'm in the 4th chapter, and it's just such a freaking beautiful thing to read. And the chapters are only about 6 pages, so it's like a pamphlet almost. H.G. Wells. And I've got Howard Kastner on board. He's not doing the chapters with me. He says that's just too. I wouldn't ask anybody to do it. It's too much work, but I enjoy it. It's kind of like I sit down to do my online diary. It's like / talk about a novel. So anyway, that's happening. And then I think probably in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do a culminating episode, and Howard Kastner is going to join me. And he told me that I asked him to pick a version because there's a lot of different versions of the Time Machine. And he picked one, I think it's like from 1939. It's around there. I don't even remember. I wrote it down, but so I'm going to watch that, and he and I are going to talk about that. He's one of my favorite guys on the Lambcast. He's got this incredible bastion of knowledge about old movies, and like everybody does, like all you guys do too, but he's just a sweet guy, and he's been on a couple times. And so I'm looking forward to that, and might have a couple other people if people want to do it. But yeah, that's Riley on Film on Spotify. Don't go to my website. You'll see a lot of religious baloney, right? Not religious, but political. A lot of political baloney right now. So I'll get over it pretty soon. But visit me on Spotify. That's the more controlled Damien.
Well, James, are you out of control or in control on your site?
Completely out of control, Richard. It's normal state of affairs, standard operating procedure. I haven't written anything for a couple of weeks because I've been focusing on one film in particular, and it'll be out this week. Promises. But things things are going good, and we'll just keep pressing on with blogging by Cinemaland.
All right. Well, on my site, as usual, I'm just checking in with the movies that I see in the theater. The last one that I saw was actually the 10th anniversary screening of The Babadook, and I enjoyed it very much. I had not seen it in a theater before, so this was a good opportunity to catch up with it, and and write about it. A very good horror film. So those of you who are horror fans, if you are not familiar with The Babadook, I would strongly recommend that. If I was submitting a film for the movie of the month, that might be the one that I would choose. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us this week, and look, I wouldn't give you 2 cents for all your fancy rules if behind them you didn't have a little bit of plain, ordinary, everyday kindness, and that's what you guys show me every time you come into the Lambcast. We'll talk to you all soon.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.
Ha 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 ha